Man, what's going on here?
We was playing cards and he tried to pull a fasting on me. Don't you lie, I know what you did.
Sir, is there any way we can work this out?
Yeah, if you start running right now and don't leave till you get out of the great state of Texas. You better run. How'd you get on my property?
I'll explain that later. Sir, can you come with me?
Promise to leave me alone after.
Well, yeah, come this way. Sir, on this way.
Whatever you say. Weirdo. Where in the Sam Houston are we?
This is 2012, sir. Now, if you'll go down there to that producer's office, just go through that door. You'll get a little bit of a better explanation.
Whatever you say.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dallas Daily News. My name is Roy M. Austin, and this is my associate,
Robert K. Calhoun.
We have a very special show for you this evening, and a very special guest to go with it. And here he is. Welcome, sir.
How you doing?
If you'll have a seat, sir.
All right, then.
Now, sir, would you tell the people your name?
Name's Andrew J. Houston. You can call me AJ. Now, what in the world was that?
That, sir, is a video camera. It takes a moving picture of whatever sits in front of it.
That's the craziest thing I ever heard.
You at home may be wondering about this man, and keep wondering. Sir, tell the people what year you're from.
I was born in 1863. I'm 33 years old.
Well, that's got to be the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Sir, could you do the pleasure of telling me and the people at home your story?
Will do. Well, where do I begin? I was born in May 1863. Mama swore I was Sam Houston's grandson, so my last name's Houston. I figure you'd rather learn about the state than me, though. I'm going to warn you, I'm going to add a few of my father's stories he used to tell me in here. Where do I start? Well, I can start with the Texas Revolution. There's a little fight between some liberal-minded folks up in Texas and there's further ones up in Mexico. They just had a little bit of disagreement. We wanted to be free from Mexico. Mexico wanted to keep on clamping down on us. Then a bunch of Germans come over here trying to settle. There's weird folks, and they started coming around 1820. They just come and just start taking over. I'll come back to them too. Oh, and I forgot about annexation. Some people up in Washington wanted us to become a state. And we decided we wanted to do that. There's a little bit of issue over that, but I'll get to that later too. Then, in the end, we became the great state of Texas. But that's how it happened.
That's a wonderful story, sir. Do you have any knowledge of the settlement of Texas?
Why, yes, I do.
Could you give us a bit of information?
I can. See, the Mexicans gave Stephen F. Austin a big old tract of land. In return, he had to bring 300 American families to go live on the Texas frontier. The Mexicans, they wanted to Mexicanize these Americans, all these white American families, make them do their culture and live how they lived, and become Roman Catholics. And that did sit a lot good with many of them. That caused a little bit of stink. But us and the Mexicans lived among us got along pretty good. We just had a problem with the ones down in Mexico City. Then all this settlement eventually brought some Europeans, mostly the Germans. And then the Irish come around too. I guess you call that manifest destiny.
Now, sir, can you give us a little bit more on the Germans?
Well, yes. I meant by mentioning their oddity earlier. They was far richer than most of us Texas folk. But they didn't halfway act like they do. They would sit on the barrel and listen to Beethoven, trying to put a sophisticated side on country life.
What did they come to Texas for?
Well, their pocketbooks was deep, so they had a head start over all of us. They headed out here to the west instead of working up in the factories in the north. Made land buying a little bit more practical.
Well, that does sound like a head start.
Well, what's your take on slavery back then?
Well, it's a divided topic. We had a number of slaves in the state. In the South, they wanted us in the Union so they could have an unfair advantage on the slave states, the free states. The Union didn't want us in because they'd draw off a balance. I think it's because they want to stop slavery spreading to the West.
That sounds about right.
Let me talk for a little bit about some land issues, if you would.
Go right ahead. You got the floor, sir.
Well, took a pretty good bit of land from what they call New Mexico. It's rightfully ours. Then the government wanted to take it away from us. So we threatened to take Santa Fe if they was going to do that. Then in the end, they wound up taking it anyway. They gave us $10 million of it to help pay off some of our debts. But I guess then we'd overstepped the boundaries a little bit with all the land claiming. After all, we claimed land all the way east of the Rio Grande, all the way up to 42nd parallel.
Well, that sounds like some politics taking over, don't it?
Down.
Politics played a part. We came out all right, I'd say.
Did that have anything to do with the Texas Revolution?
Politics did, but the debt came after. We had a bunch of trouble in that revolution.
How so?
It all started in 1835. Mexicans wanted to take all of our rights as Texans away. Things got a little bit heated and all blew up at the Alamo. We had some famous Americans like David Crockett, Jim Bowie fighting with us, but wound up as a massacre on massacring us. Same thing with Goliad. Then we got a little bit of fire in us and got a few more men, a little bit more gunpowder, and took on Santa Ana once again at San Jacinto. We whooped off Santa Ana and won our independence.
Now tell me, if you will, about Washington's problem relating to Texas.
It was basically fighting Washington to keep us out of the Union.
Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, what happened is James A. Polk got elected in 1844. Mr. John Tyler hadn't done nothing. Figured it was a crowd to annex Texas. He figured he'd have to save his presidency by passing a joint resolution to get us. And it worked. Angered the Mexicans something awful. But it worked.
That's interesting, sir. Could you talk to us a little bit more about the issues with Mexico, particularly while Polk was in office?
Oh yeah, this is a big issue over the boundary. See, we thought we had all the land up to the Rio Grande. Mexicans thought we only had it to the Nueces. At that time, Mexicans still thought we belonged to them, but we really didn't.
What about California?
Well, that was a big stink right there too. They had an issue over that too, so we sent Mr. John Slidell on down to Mexico City to try to buy them up from Mexico. Mexico wouldn't budge.
And what did that lead to?
Sounds like you lead to a fight.
Well, you'd be right. Old Zach Taylor and a good force to go from the Nueces to the Polk. And Polk wanted to declare war for the Mexicans being unreasonable, but his cabinet wouldn't do it unless Mexico fired first. And they did, and they killed 16 of Taylor's best men. Congress declared war, and they made it the Mexican War.
Now, how did Polk convince Congress?
Well, being honest, son, said good-natured U.S. men had been killed on U.S. soil, but in fact, they got killed on soil claimed by Mexico. This made old Honest Abe, before he was president, of course, make his spot resolutions. He wanted to release the exact spot in the U.S. where the soldiers had been shot. He got some ridicule for it, but it didn't matter much.
So how about some more on the Mexican War?
Well, there's some big battles. Of course, the biggest was the Battle of Buena Vista. Americans was weakened from a long charge, and Santa Ana had attacked Taylor's men. They hung him there. They finally beat him back to where they started. Of course, he ended up winning. We got what was ours.
Well, then it all worked out. And I hear a lot about the British working with independent Texas. Could you give a little bit on
Well, they just wanted to make a road in the United States. They wanted to use it to stop the U.S. moving south and create a diversion to the Europeans so they could take part of North America.
That just doesn't seem fair, does it?
Sure don't. I'm glad it didn't amount to much.
Here, here.
Now, what is the story behind the re-annexation of Texas?
Well, Democrats wanted to make Texas was theirs. So they started pushing for statehood. Same thing happened in Oregon. Anybody ever hear of 5440 or 5?
Well, I believe we all have. But sir, we're about to run out of time, and for our last topic, I would like for you to talk a little bit about the exodus of blacks from the South.
Well, there's a bunch of slaves left over after they was emancipated, and it was about 1878, 1880. So a lot of them packed up and left their farms and headed to other western states like Kansas. And they started making their own communities and such. And it all stopped because some of the Mississippi riverboat drivers wouldn't let them cross the Mississippi.
Well, sir, I would like to thank you. You've got to be one of the most informative guests we've ever had.
No doubt about that. I imagine this interview will be well remembered.
Thank you, sir. And once again, the time traveler from Texas in 1896. And good night from the Dallas Daily News, Roy M. Austin.
Robert K. Calhoun.
Thank you, and good night.